Imagine living between two of the most powerful countries on earth. To the north lies Russia, to the south lies China. Together, they possess nuclear weapons, massive economies, enormous militaries, and a long history of dominating Eurasia. Now imagine trying to survive between them. For most countries, that would be a nightmare. Yet somehow Mongolia has managed to do exactly that, which raises an intriguing question. How does a nation of just 3 million people survive between two giants? Because Mongolia's greatest strength may actually come from its greatest weakness. Geography has shaped the destiny of nations for thousands of years, and Mongolia's geography presents a unique challenge. Unlike Japan or Britain, Mongolia has no ocean access. Unlike India, it doesn't possess natural barriers separating it from its neighbors. It is completely landlocked and surrounded by only two countries, Russia and China. This creates a dangerous reality. Almost every road, railway, and trade routes ultimately depends on one of its neighbors, and dependence creates vulnerabilities. But Mongolia has spent decades turning that vulnerability into an advantage. Ironically, Mongolia was once the giant. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongolia Empire became the largest contiguous empire in history. From Korea to Eastern Europe, from Siberia to the Middle East. For a brief moment, Mongolia ruled much of the known world. But empires rarely last forever. Over time, the Mongol Empire fragmented, and eventually, Mongolia found itself caught between two rising powers, Russia to the north, China to the south. The descendants of conquerors became the country trying to avoid being conquered. History can be brutally ironic. Most people assume Russia is Mongolia's biggest concern, but economically, China dominates. More than 80% of Mongolia's export go to China. Coal, copper, mineral, Kashmir. China is far by Mongolia's largest customer. And this creates a hidden danger. Economic dependence can become political dependence. Mongolia understands this, which is why it constantly seeks way to avoid relying too heavily on Beijing. Here's something fascinating. Mongolia has developed what it called the third neighbor policy. Because it only has two physical neighbors, so it created imaginary ones. Countries like the United States, Japan, South Korea, India, European nations. These countries aren't geographically close, but diplomatically they serve as Mongolia's third neighbors. The goal is simple: prevent either Russia or China from becoming too dominant. This is one of the most creative foreign policy strategies in modern geopolitics. Common sense says small countries are weak, but sometimes small countries possess advantages. They are less threatening, they can remain flexible, they can cooperate with multiple powers, and they can avoid becoming direct rivals. Mongolia understands something profound. It cannot compete with Russia, it cannot compete with China. So instead of competing, it balances. And balancing has become one of its greatest survival tools. Most people see Mongolia's geography as a curse, and in many ways it is. But it also creates stability. Neither Russia nor China wants the other to dominate Mongolia completely, because Mongolia acts as a buffer, a neutral space separating two great powers. And buffer states often possess strategic importance far beyond their size. In a strange way, Mongolia's weakness protects it, because both giants prefer a stable Mongolia over an unstable one controlled entirely by the other. History is filled with countries trapped between powerful neighbors: Poland, Afghanistan, Beijing, Ukraine. Many became battlegrounds. Mongolia chose a different path. Instead of becoming a frontline state, it became a balancing state, and that strategy has allowed it to maintain independence for decades, not through military power, but through diplomacy. Here's what makes Mongolia so fascinating: its survival doesn't come from strength, it comes from understanding its limitations. Mongolia knows it cannot dominate, so it focuses on something far more important: adaptation. And history shows that nations that adapt often outlast nations that merely possesses power. Because in geopolitics, survival itself can be a victory. Mongolia's story isn't really about being trapped, it's about balance. It's about surviving in a world dominated by giants. And perhaps that's why Mongolia matters far more than most people realize. Because its story reveals one of the oldest lessons in history. Power isn't always about size. Sometimes power